Hi everyone, welcome to week 3 of Binary Tree Digital Literacy Training. Today we'll be learning about files, file handling, programming logic, conditionals, and loops. Week 3, Files and File Handling. This week is mainly about files and file handling. We'll learn what different file types are, why files are important, and how to organize and use them correctly. First of all, what are they? We have different types of files. We have PNG files, which stand for Portable Network Graphics. It's an image file format that supports high quality pictures and transparent backgrounds. PNG files are most commonly used for logos, text, and web graphics. And we have MP4, which stands for MPEG4 Part 14. It's commonly used to store video and audio, and MP files work on many different devices and media players. Moving on to JPEG and PDF files. JPEG stands for Joint Photographic Experts Group. It's commonly used for digital photographs, and they have smaller file sizes and are compatible with many devices and programs. PDF stands for Portable Document Format. PDFs keep the same formatting across different devices. They are most commonly used for forms, ebooks, documents, and scanned files. Now we have GIF, which stands for Graphics Interchange Format. GIF files can contain images or short animations. They are most commonly used for memes and web graphics. Then we have ZIP, which is a compressed file format. It combines multiple files into one specific file and can reduce their size, which makes storing and sharing these files much easier. Next, we have CSV files, which stands for comma separated values. CSV files store information in rows and columns using commas. They're most commonly used with spreadsheets, databases, and data analysis programs. TXT stands for plain text. A TXT file just contains simple unformatted text. Programmers often use TXT files for notes, raw data, and configuration information. Why are files so important? They're so important because they allow us to store, organize, and share digital information. Files can contain documents, pictures, videos, programs, and many other types of data. Files can also be transferred between phones, tablets, and computers. Standard file formats make it easier for different devices and programs to exchange information. Using files. There are several good habits for using files. First, use meaningful file names that describe the content of the file. For example, instead of using document1.docx, use report sales Q3.docx. Second, organize with folders. Create folders to group related files. This makes it so much easier to find what you need. Use a consistent naming system, such as underscores or hyphens between words. You should also back up important files and use cloud storage, such as Google Drive. Files can be compressed to save storage space and make them much faster to transfer. Sensitive files should be shared securely using passwords or encryption. Learn keyboard shortcuts. Use keyboard shortcuts to quickly create, open, and manage files. Programming logic and pseudocode. Programming logic is the sequence of steps and decisions that a computer follows to solve a problem. Programming logic is useful because it helps programs run correctly. It also helps programmers think critically solve problems, and make code easier to understand. Pseudocode is a simplified way to write the steps of a program using just plain English. Pseudocode helps you plan your code before writing it. It also makes your ideas easier to understand, explain, and debug. Tips for developing a solid programming logic. First, visualize logic with flowcharts. You should practice often and ask for help when you need it. Start with small and simple problems before moving on to more complicated and complex ones. Large problems should be broken down into smaller and much more manageable steps. You should also test your code thoroughly to make sure it works just as it should. Conditionals and loops. Conditionals allow a program to make decisions based on certain conditions. For example, an if statement checks whether a condition is true. If it is true, the program runs a specific block of code. Loops allow a program to repeat code multiple times. A for loop is usually used when you know how many times the code should repeat. A while loop repeats code as long as a condition remains true. If, elif, else, and case statements. An if statement checks the first condition. If it is true, the code inside the if block runs. If the first condition is false, an elif statement can check another condition. An else statement runs when none of the previous conditions are true. A case statement, which is also a switch statement, runs different blocks of code based on the value of an expression. It is useful when there are several possible conditions. If else example. This is an example of an else if else statement. The program checks whether a condition is true, and if it is true, the first block of code runs. If it's false, then the code in the else block runs. Case example. This is an example of a case statement. The program checks the value and then selects the matching case. Each case can run a different block of code. An introduction to conditionals and loops. A for loop goes through a sequence of items, such as a list or a set of numbers. For example, if we have a list of fruits, a for loop can go through the list and print each fruit one at a time. A while loop repeats code as long as a condition is true. For example, game may use a while loop to continue running until the player loses all their lives or the game is over. For loop example. This is an example of a for loop. The loop goes through each item or number in the sequence. Each time the loop repeats, it runs the code inside the loop. Output shows the result after each repetition. While loop example. This is an example of a while loop. Program checks the condition before every repetition. As long as the condition is true, the code continues running. When the condition becomes false, the loop stops. Example. Research a virtual environment. For this activity, you will research virtual environment software and how it was created. You can choose softwares such as Python's virtual environment, Docker, or VirtualBox. You will research the types of files the software creates or manages, how it helps execute code, and why it was created. You should use credible sources in the research techniques we learned last week. Virtual environments can create or manage different files. For example, a requirements.txt file lists the libraries and dependencies needed for a Python project. A Docker file defines the environment used by a Docker container. Configuration files store specific settings for the environment. Think about how you could use a requirements.txt file to share project dependencies with your team. Managing these files helps code run correctly on different computers. Imagine you're in a scenario. that your project needs specific versions of certain libraries. Without a virtual environment, the code may produce errors. Virtual environments use commands and automation to create environments and install dependencies. For example, Python-m when creates a Python virtual environment. The command pip install -r requirements.txt installs the dependencies listed inside a requirements file. Think about how this automation can reduce human error and improve collaboration between programmers. That concludes it for week 3.